Well, thank you all for being with us virtually, and thank you for joining us, Khalil, as we do this via Zoom so we can keep our community safe and healthy. Um, my name is Amelia Layton. I'm the Public Programs Manager at the Tacoma Art Museum in the Education Department. And I'm just super excited to be here today and learn some more about the Harlem Renaissance. As you can tell, as you're already doing it in the chat, have conversations, ask questions. I'll be monitoring that. But there's also the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And that's where you can just ask specific questions and we'll make sure we get them answered at the end of the presentation. So as Khalil's speaking and you're learning and you have more questions, let us know and we'll have time for that at the end. This program is being recorded on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people. As our museum specifically sits on the traditional homeland of the Puyallup tribe of Indians, we make intentional efforts to create inclusive and respectful partnerships that honor Indigenous cultures, histories, identities, and sociopolitical realities. Just like the Kinsey collection. The Kinsey African American Art and History Collection celebrates the achievements and contributions of Black Americans from 1595 to the present. Hopefully you've had a chance to see the exhibit. Many of you have multiple times, which is great. You have until November 28th to see it again. And just a reminder that we're open and free on Thursday nights from 5 to 8 p.m. So great time to bring your family. We're joined today by Khalil Kinsey, whose youthful interest in African American and familial history inspired his parents' collecting journey many years ago and is now the chief curator of the Kinsey collection. Khalil's passion and energy have been infectious, and TAM staff, including myself, have loved getting to work really closely with him. I'm excited to learn more about the history of the Harlem Renaissance that you've been studying and get a little more information on how it has never really ended and how the Harlem Renaissance is still going on today. So take it away, Khalil.
So much, Amelia. The feeling is completely mutual, as you know. Just having the opportunity to work with you and everyone at TAM has just been one of my great professional pleasures, and also just a wonderful personal pleasure in terms of making great friends. And that's really the spirit in which I like to work. And this has just been beyond my dreams in terms of just being a wonderful experience. And I look forward to continuing our friendships long after the exhibition is gone. Hi, everyone. And thank you for the introduction. Khalil Kinsey, broadcasting live from the downtown Tacoma Marriott. I'm in Tacoma, across the street from the incredible Tacoma Art Museum. We opted to do the Zoom from my hotel room just due to making sure that the Wi-Fi would be stable and we would be able to do this in a seamless way. But I will be going over to the museum after the session. And so if anyone is so compelled to hop over to the museum for the final couple hours of opening today, I'll be there and would be happy to see you and love to take you through the exhibition. We originally had planned this, of course, for a in-person, conversational kind of event. And it was one in which I was always very keen to do in terms of being able to engage and provide a platform and shine a light on so many incredible artists and creatives and thinkers and business people here in Tacoma and in the greater Pacific Northwest. But in lieu of of course in respect for safety and everything, we took it online, and we appreciate you all being here with us. This is about something that's very near and dear to my heart, something that I'm very passionate about. In no ways consider myself a scholar of, but something that I've come to see and find myself in as far as a participant and actor in the kind of lineage and continuum that was laid, with the foundation that was laid by the participants of the Harlem Renaissance, and something that I've come to really heighten my understanding and the around the significance of that then and now. And so it's something I love to talk about. It's something that I love, an idea that I love to centralize when it comes to The fact that history is still very much a part of our lives and that we are shaping it every day, and that there is more power, I believe, to harness from understanding that we are on the shoulders and are the embodiment of the branches and the extensions of these periods of history. And it is, our duty and honor and to continue, and in a way that we're not thinking that we're starting over. As far as Black life in America is concerned, we have consistently, our progress is consistently under attack. It is consistently being dismantled. Even now, to this day, as I'm sure you all are aware, we are experiencing a time where progress is systematically being attacked through voter suppression, through arcane laws, through the overall criminalization or perception of criminalization of Black life. It's always a constant, and so to be able to thrive and persevere through all of that is no small feat. It's an enormous feat. And I've found great power in understanding the Harlem Renaissance in particular as being not only an incredibly creative time, but more importantly, in my opinion, a time of building community and consciousness and self-determination and the idea around we are not what you call us, we're what we call ourselves. And it's something I identify with greatly, and I've come to kind of see myself as a participant in, as it extends. But let's get into it. I've got a little presentation that I'm going to share with you, and we're just going to, kind of hopefully have some fun with it. Normally I would be in person and being able to feed off of the energy of everyone that we are, speaking with. But hopefully that still shines through, and even just the comments from folks that are coming in is such an energizing thing, to be able to know that you all have embraced this exhibition, and us, as a family by extension, is something that is incredibly humbling, that we do not take lightly and do not take for granted, and we are ever appreciative of for your support and understanding and desire for more understanding and sharing. So thank you so much. I'm Khalil Kinsey. This is the Kinsey African American History Collection live. And I'm going to give a little background before I dive all the way in. I just want to give a shout to my mom and pop, and this is a representation of them, but they are online, I think, in the audience. They're home in LA, and without them would be no me, but without them would be no Kinsey African American Art and History Collection in the way that we have come to know it. Coming from just a passion for discovery and wanting to share, to learn more for my benefit and their own, something that was very personal. Then, you know what, I'm making sure that I, before I do this, am I sharing the screen? Let's go share the screen. Let's go ahead and do that. Pardon me. Okay, let's see. All right, are we sharing now? Somebody give me a thumbs up.
You're good.
All right. One more time, shout out to my dear mom and pop. They're online now. Almost 55 years of marriage, a life of purpose and responsibility. Something that I, have found great example in and inspiration in, and continue to. This exhibition has changed my life. In all kinds of ways. And I always say it's not because it started by my mother and father, or not because it has my last name in the title or anything, but because I've learned about myself as a result, and I've been able to find so much power in our history and understanding my presence in it. But without their responsible and presence of mind in terms of the proposition of sharing this exhibition in a public way. They could have easily just kept it in their home and covered, in a coveted kind of way, and shared it with whoever came through their doors. But their responsibility and they've always been compelled to serve. And I'm just, always really, really in awe of it. And here we are in Tacoma with in one of the, what is one of my favorite exhibitions that I've done in my career. And it's just been, a wonderful journey for us to do this together. And so I just wanted to start by acknowledging them and saying what's up, and I love you. And for those who have not been to TAM for the Kinsey African American Art and History Collection, it is up through November 28th. For anyone who's online from out of town or anything, we will be, hopefully you were able to make it, but if not, we will be sharing photos and images. And there's so much on the TAM website that TAM's been doing programmatically that really gives you a deep dive into the fullness of the collection and the way that we share it, and all of the branches that extend out from it. But a few installation shots of the show. This is in the Russell Gallery. This is where the historic component really lies and rests, and kind of the beginnings of the exhibition and our origin story. And then this is Annie's Gallery, where it really is this flourish of artistic brilliance and speaking to, very center of thought around what we're talking about today, which is the Harlem Renaissance. One of the things that the central bedrock foundation of what we strive to share and dispel is the myth of absence. And the myth of absence is a concept coined by Lerone Bennett, a historian and writer in the 70s, who said that, in the telling of the American story, African Americans are invisible presences, and not because they are absent, but because of a myth that requires their absence. And what we're striving to do is fill in the blanks to history in a way that puts Black people in not only in the narrative, but in the starring roles that they actually played, so that we all can understand deeper how much we benefit from African-American life and contribution, but also how we all share in a history and continue, and perhaps how we can move forward in a more unified way. And it's really like, what I always tell kids, it's like, being photoshopped out of, a yearbook photo, when you were the class president, you know what I mean? And the yearbook comes out and you're nowhere to be found, and you can never prove that you were there or made any type of contribution to the school. And that's quite frankly what happens every day in the telling of the American story and how American history is shared. And that's what we're striving to fill in the blanks to through all kinds of different, materials and information. But what we're talking about today is the Harlem Renaissance, something that I say is still very much alive, but with that, we're in the midst of the 100-year celebration of, in this era. It roughly got its start as far as really, being coined, the Renaissance in this movement, in the late 1910s, 1918, 1917, but really got its really gained its steam in the 20s. And, being that we are now in the 2020s, the thinking about that and the celebration of 100 years of the Harlem Renaissance led me to think about it in a lot of different ways, but then come to that conclusion that what we're having now and the talk around a new Renaissance and things like that is not that at all. It's not a Renaissance. It's not a rebirth. It's a reawakening. It's a continuing. And I find great power in that. And I think that is something, when you talk about momentum and you talk about energy and all of that, and what Black people need to continue going, is understanding that we are part of something that continues, and not that we're not starting over all the time, because that takes a whole different type of energy. And that's what I've kind of started to really hone in and start to share through the lens of, a youthful vision for young people to harness that power. So this is kind of what I started, kind of processing. What would African American consciousness and creative culture look like today had it not been for the artists, writers, scholars, actors, musicians, activists, and entrepreneurs that shaped the Harlem Renaissance, those who were bold enough to tell our stories shamelessly and publicly? The Harlem Renaissance represents a time when African Americans seized the cultural, political, and economic space to be their full selves, to be free and full Americans. Through embracing their various artistic talents, many African Americans found themselves seeking self-expression through their works. Participants in the new Negro movement saw this volatile time as an opportunity to debunk the prejudice and stereotypes that they had been combating for centuries. This became a catalyst for a national social movement and a reconceptualization about how many Blacks saw themselves. This movement grew to be known as the Harlem Renaissance. We see the reflection and evolution of the Harlem Renaissance in the artists, thinkers, activists, and community builders that are shaping culture today. And I've seen that firsthand here in Tacoma, and have been, just thrilled to identify that and identify, the participants in continuing that. Some who are friends of mine and who have become new friends, and it's just really, really awesome to a beautiful byproduct of my work and our work is being able to travel around and see firsthand all of the beauty that's happening in so many places that might not have gotten to otherwise. And so that's really just been something that's continues to ground our work. But that time is this time. The parallels are uncanny. And thinking about then and now, it's just so many similarities, but also that very thought around that, that time is this time. I've come to believe that there is no greater significant cultural time or cultural era in American history than the Harlem Renaissance. When you think about this explosion and this redefinition of self, and it was not simply art, it was thought, it was literature, it was music, it was fashion, it was all of these things, photography, it was everything. And you start thinking about what that was and what it meant and what it birthed as a result. I really challenge, I've come to feel challenged, as far as that. I don't think that there's any greater culturally significant time than that. But before we go into that time, you have to know what birthed it. After Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865 and the first vote, we began a time of Reconstruction, which really was what I say wasn't Reconstruction, it was construction, because we were building a brand new life, a brand new thought, a brand new identity, because our identity had been erased, and being as far as being stolen from Africa and forced to, into labor and forced to have a whole different existence. So it's not Reconstruction, it's construction. It was actually building from the ground up. But what you saw, during Reconstruction was Black people rushing to participate in the American process and to be fully seen as American citizens by the law, as far as being legally married, starting businesses, participating in the political process, being elected to office, all of these things, and so much more. To find family, to start family, all of those things were happening. And for a period of time, there was a bright spot as far as Black progress, and then slowly the dismantling of that progress began, and that came through the rise of arcane laws and Black codes and slave codes and the voter suppression, all kinds of different things, American terrorism in terms of the Ku Klux Klan and other groups. All of that arose to dismantle that progress. But at the same time, you had poets such as Paul Laurence Dunbar. You had things all of these parallels and things that were going on. These are pieces from the collection. And I want to kind of move through things quickly because we only have an hour, so I don't want to go too deep, far in depth, but just giving you some touch points on and reference points on how this all came to be. This is a document that's in the collection, North Carolina Law for Separate Accommodation, for Segregation, Separate Accommodation for White and Colored Passengers on Buses. This was the rise of separate but equal, but we all know that was very much separate and unequal. Also at that time was, again, back to the slave codes and these laws, was what was referred to as the peonage era, or in a more common term, the chain gang system, where Black people were essentially re-enslaved. But it may have been a even worse period, because Black people were were arrested and jailed for the most, the smallest forms of offenses. It's such as walking on the sidewalk and not getting off the sidewalk if a white person was passing, or a gathering of 3 or more, black men being, considered to be, loitering and being picked up. All kinds of different things, playing checkers with a white person, walking on the train tracks, not having proof of employment on you at all times. You could be locked up for that. And you're given a fine, excuse me, and you can't pay the fine, and then your trial comes, and the magistrate it's based on a corrupt system where the magistrate receives a $5 for a non-guilty verdict versus $10 for a guilty verdict. And what you see is this spike in the papers and in statistics around Black crime. And that really was the rise to the narrative around that this criminalization of Black life, which was based on a corrupt system and based on a myth, but really based on dismantling progress. This right here is a letter that is in the book Slavery by Another Name, written by Doug Blackman in 2008, and also won the Pulitzer that year. But long story short, page 8, unbeknownst to us until my father was reading it, is this letter from Carrie Kinsey in 1903 to Theodore Roosevelt, because she sees no other way but to try to get the attention of the president, because her brother had been kidnapped by the sheriff in Bainbridge, Georgia, and put into bondage. This happened all over the South for pretty much from the Civil War all the way up to World War II. And Black men, some women, some whites were jailed and leased to U.S. Corporations such as U.S. Steel and the Railroad Company and the like, and they were worked until they died, essentially, not given any value, and so that's the difference between that and slavery, because while they both were horrific, American slavery, at least there was some value placed on the Black life. Then this time there was none. At the same time, you're beginning to we're going to war in World War I, and Black troops are not allowed to fight on the side of the U.S. due to General Pershing's racism and discrimination. But the French are losing the war, and they enter into an agreement where that Black troops, pretty much they're borrowing Black troops, and they give in this case 369th Regiment Harlem Hellfighters French guns, French uniforms, and training. Although they were highly skilled in infantry, they go to war on the side of the French and are credited with keeping France, but also fought, valiantly, died at some of the highest rates, but were the first to reach the Rhine River after fighting for a consecutive 191 days. What's really awesome about that as well, though, is while they're there in France, they introduced France to jazz. So many jazz musicians were enlisted in the army. They introduced the French to jazz. They also are experiencing life in a much more liberated sense, in a much freer way, and they are beloved, by many accounts, by the French people, and so they understand a different level of humanity. But they return home. Many return home to the same atrocities and horrors, that are happening towards Black life. Some are hung in their uniforms. They're not given the same benefits as their white counterparts, as far as the government and reward for their service. But they had this. They played such a role in coming back to I was about to say to LA, to the States, and say and share their experiences, in this kind of refined way, and really, were contributed to this new consciousness. Here's some military postcards. Taylor, keep me on time too, man. The same, during the same period, you have the rise or the formation of the NAACP, which is really, one of our most significant watchdog organizations, really, that held America accountable to these injustices and this violence, and keeping track of all of this American violence, but also such a cultured and intellectual organization as well. During this time, W.E. Du Bois formed the Crisis magazine, which is still in publication today. But during this time, under his editorship, there were just incredibly creative, these publications from chapters all over the country. We are blessed to have one of the most, what is considered to be one of the most intact collections in existence from 1911 to 1927 under the editorship of W.E. Du Bois. What's beautiful about these covers and much of the contents are that they are illustrated by so many artists of note that became, part of the Harlem Renaissance. So it's really special to be able to read and look who did these covers and all of that, because you then, you see the birth of this community and this movement. Again, the all of this, the pendulum back and forth. The Ku Klux Klan was terrorizing Black life, and continues to in many ways, as far as kind of the evolution of what they were and the groups that they've spawned. But this is domestic terrorism. And they did, what I think about all the time and what we talk about all the time is these are the people that were, the government officials and the lawmen and so many folks who held, a lot in the balance were putting on these hoods at night. And terrorizing Black life, and that still in many ways goes on today. This is a broadside from from lynching from the NAACP. Gonna move on a little quicker. It's 2:30. This actually was a beach where my mother went to the beach in St. Augustine, Florida. This is a segregated beach, American Beach Negro Ocean Playground. And then this, of course, is the infamous drinking fountain sign. But what's interesting is that these both are about water, essentially. You have things going on such as the 100-mile race, again, back to the self-determination of the time. Black men are not able to, are denied entrance into the Indy 500. And so they start their own race. And this is a program from the first, one of the annual, this is the first annual 100-mile race in Indianapolis. Again, this birth of a new consciousness and this determination. Marcus Garvey, an incredible businessman and thinker, and very incredibly influential. Excuse me. He had hotels and laundromats and newspapers, and I mean he was an incredible entrepreneur, but also devoted his resources and his time to the liberation of Black people and what was to be a return to Africa. He thought that the only way that Black people would get any type of semblance of respect or humanity would be to leave America and rebuild in Africa and take their economic power with them. His progress, of course, was dismantled as well. But he had over 2 million followers, people that were very interested in what he had to say, and many who were ready to follow him to Africa. Madam C.J. Walker, the first female self-made millionaire in the United States, not the first Black female self-millionaire, the first female self-made millionaire. An incredible mind and influence. She took her resources, and what I always loved about learning about this is that she had her business in Indianapolis, but took her resources and moved to Harlem, at the height of the movement, to be able to support and be a part of this incredible explosion, of identity that was happening in Harlem. But it's important to note that while it's called the Harlem Renaissance, it really was more of a movement that spanned far outside of Harlem and New York, but also got its real roots in the Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland area. And that was due to a lot, but first off being the feeder schools that Paul Laurence Dunbar High School in Baltimore, Maryland, that then had students that went to Howard University. Now, Howard University was the first historically Black college and university that to form a fine arts department. And what, when you start seeing who graduated or who was professors there or whatever it may be, you see so many that went to be these artists of notes and these contributors to the Harlem Renaissance. Before I go any further, Carter G. Woodson also played an incredible role in terms of this empowerment and understanding the importance of Black history and the importance of telling a fuller Black history. He wrote The Miseducation of the Negro and also founded Black History Month. But he was a graduate of Harvard University, one of the first black graduates, and an incredible mind. But it was Negro History Week when he started, and then it now what we know as Black History Month. What I'll say about Black History Month, and we honor Carter G. Woodson, but where we are now and what we try to do with the Kinsey collection and what the conversation has been for many years, for many years before us, has been that there shouldn't be a need for a Black History Month, and by proxy, what it says is that somehow we're not fully American, in kind of the way that I've come to interpret it. This month that is limited in what you're able to tell, what you're able to explore in school, and oftentimes it's redundant. It covers the same figures and the same heroes and holidays, and it does not fill in the blanks to share with all of us, and particularly young people, the fact that they can do it too, and that it's not it's not the end result. It's about the community. It's about people that work together, and also that is not simply about pain and struggle. Our history largely is taught from that angle, and I have a very, very big problem with that, because it does not allow for us to see the fullness of our being or take credit or get credit for this country in all of its forms. Pretty much, we are the reason that America is the superpower that it is to this day, and never gave it up from the beginnings. From a few generations of its formation to rising to this #1 superpower in the world. That's due to the presence of Black life in America, our mind share, our ingenuity, our strength, our labor, our pain, our struggle, our blood. That is all. That is the reason. The telling of the American story should be one that is inclusive of the Native American as the origin, of the European, of course, and of course of the African American. Without those three, and without the telling of a fuller story, we can't see each other together. And I believe that one of the ways that we start doing that is to integrate all of those histories in a continual way throughout the school year and just period. Speaking about Howard University and that fine arts department, Dr. Elaine Locke is who coined the term the New Negro with his book called The New Negro, written and published, I believe, in 1924. It really was a book that said, go out and share and paint and talk about, write about, discuss, your experiences as Black people. We are not slaves. We are not downtrodden. We are not what you call us. We are what we, and thus the idea around the new Negro. Also from a very intellectual standpoint, he was the first Black Rhodes Scholar, and also held a PhD from Harvard University. Incredibly brilliant man. Also wrote The Negro in Art in 1941. Considered to be, one of the foremost art historians. Himself and James Porter, who was the chairman of the Howard University Fine Arts Department. There he is, James Porter. And that's his wife, Dorothy Porter, also an artist in her own right and educator. Augusta Savage. These are just a few. I'm not going to go too in depth on all of these works. I'm going to get through a few pieces, but just wanted to share a few works in the collection from some seminal Harlem Renaissance era artists, and perhaps this is one of the most recognizable and celebrated works of art from the Harlem Renaissance. And this is Gammon, 1929, by Augusta Savage. Now, this piece is of her nephew. Gammon is another word for or it's like, I believe it's called street urchin, and it really was her honoring nephew, and by extension, Black boys, all over, being, that they giving them this elevated respect and dignity, and that they are not street urchins. But this work won her the Julius Rosenwald Foundation grant. Julius Rosenwald was a Jewish philanthropist and CEO of Sears and Roebuck at the time. Also worked with Booker T. Washington in building schools across the South for Black youth. But he had this foundation that gave to Black art and promoted and helped celebrated Black artists. And she won this award, and she was able to go to Paris and study at the Sorbonne, which is now University of Paris, off of this work. And then she came back to the United States and became an incredible educator and influence to so many African American artists, most notably Jacob Lawrence, who she had a great relationship with as an educator and this kind of teacher and pupil thing. She came back to the States from France with a contract with the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, to do work. But when she came back, that slot had been given up. So she was pretty disillusioned with the art world in terms of pursuing a career. And so she went into educating, but left an incredible mark on art history as a result. Another great catalyst for Black art and understanding was the Harmon Foundation. William Harmon was a white gentleman, a real estate developer who also championed Black artists and gave Black artists some of their first opportunities to publicly show their work, which is, still the number one thing that any artist needs is exposure. And this was some of the first times that Black artists were able to do that and share their work that was not, the quote unquote commercially viable methods such as still lifes, portraits, and landscapes, but more so sharing, with credit to Dr. Lane Locke, sharing this new identity and painting and sculpting and writing about about Black culture and Black existence. And so many incredible artists came through this program, won this contest, and went on to do incredible things. It was a contest that if you won, you would be awarded $400 and your own solo exhibition. And it's amazing to learn about what so many of these artists did with their the contest winnings. Many traveled abroad to further their education and did all kinds of things. May Howard Jackson being a participant, but also, an incredible woman, Black woman, female artist of the late 1800s into the Harlem Renaissance era. She also became quite disillusioned with the art world due to her being of mixed heritage and never quite being accepted by, either white or Black groups. But she was trained fine arts training at the Philadelphia School of Art, and also became a great educator as well. Some others, and so many artists that are in the collection, we note that they participated in the Harmon Foundation and also won the awards. Richmond Barthé won the second award at the Harmon Foundation. Charles Alston, he actually created did so much, but he was on the commission for the Works Progress Administration and also became one of the first Black staff members at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Thank you. 245. Alma Thomas, the first graduate of the Howard University Fine Arts program, one of my favorite artists. This is Fiery Sunset. I am always a little bit sad when I see this piece because it's no longer in our collection, but you can see it if you visit New York and go to MoMA. It was acquired from us by MoMA several years ago. I believe it's traveling right now as part of an incredible retrospective exhibition that's Alma Thomas. It's called Life is Beautiful. It's getting ready to open at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. shortly. It just left the Chrysler Museum in Virginia, I believe it is, and then going on to Nashville to the Frist, and then going to conclude in Columbus, Georgia, at the Columbus Museum, where Alma Thomas is actually from. But she's the first graduate of the Howard University Fine Arts program. She was a teacher for much of her life, and really began sharing her work in a professional way later in her life. But she was the first Black female artist to have a solo exhibition at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, and she was in her 70s at the time, and now is getting what is the pretty much since then her first retrospective. She died in the 70s shortly after that exhibition, and now we're able to celebrate her work. She's one of my favorites. She's so vibrant and beautiful. We have several works in the collection, and if you come to TAM, you will see them. But these two are also part of the exhibition, the retrospective exhibition. So these are two that are still in the collection, but are on tour as part of the Life is Beautiful Alma Thomas retrospective. We love these pieces. This one on the right is one of her first, is referenced as perhaps one of her very, very first works. It's really incredible because it's a double-sided still life, so it's framed in a way that you can hang it either way, and you have two different paintings. And to see her journey through art and how she got to abstraction and her methods and her theories is really something that I always enjoy. But this is one of her origin pieces. Zora Neale Hurston, incredible contributor to cultural anthropology and the Harlem Renaissance from a intellectual and quite vibrant place. One of my mom's favorite figures. She grew up in a town near to where Zora Neale Hurston lived in Florida. And what really is incredible is that my great uncle, my mother's uncle, James A. Webster, he passed away many years ago. He was an educator, and there's a school named after him in St. Augustine, Florida. But he was a part of the Harlem Renaissance arts community, and a great friend of so many incredible participants of the Harlem Renaissance, and Zora Neale Hurston being one of them. So he left my mother 5 letters, some of which were handwritten to him, others that are typed, and just really, really incredible examples of her pen, and which in some ways could be could cut you like a knife or embrace you, and just really, really incredible to read. There are several on display, well, 2 on display, excuse me, not several, 2 on display at TAM. This is actually one of the when I learned about Fire magazine is what really kind of started leading me down the path of exploring the Harlem Renaissance and wanting to share it through the lens of today. This, if you can see, it's Fire, devoted to younger Negro artists. People don't, we see these black and white photos, and we see these suits and dresses and, and everything, and we think that these people are older than they were. But most of these artists and contributors were young people. They were in their 20s and 30s. And but what's more is that they were, when we talk about them individually, but they were a community, and this was a movement. And they were in concert with each other in ways of support and influence and love and all of these things. And this is kind of an example of that, where 7 or 8 people of note, such as Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes and County Cullen, Aaron Douglas, who did the cover of this magazine, Richard Bruce Nugent, and others, formed this magazine called Fire, devoted to younger Negro artists, 1926. What's ironic about it is that there was only 1 issue, and the place where it was printed burned down. So it was very, I don't know if it was arson or what, but it burned down with, for a magazine called Fire, really met an ironic fate. But in these pages of this magazine, when I had the chance to read it, it was just amazing how much is the same, both in the ways of issues and challenges, but also in the ways of creativity and thinking and community and all of those things. In these pages, there are plays, there's poetry, there's art, there are opinion, think pieces. It talks about identity and love and relationships, and also about discrimination and all of these challenges. And it's really just quite brilliant. But I really started to see that time is this time through this lens, and this is what kind of sparked it for me. And here we are. This is the Harlem Renaissance, inclusive of these components and so much more. And as I came up, I participated in so much of this. I love the written word and kind of consider myself to be a writer, and wrote poetry growing up, and that extended into making rap music and art, which is a form of art, of course, but also the visual arts, which I've delved into. Fashion, I worked for many years in the fashion industry, and all of it though came down to community. It's always been about this connection and how we do things together, this collaboration, and how we're better as a result of it. I thrive off of the sharing of ideas and mostly the sharing of love and good energy. And that's what I've come to understand the lens that I've come to understand the Harlem Renaissance through, that it wasn't one thing or the other, it was all of it. And that it continues to this day, and has taken new form and new shapes, but that we are the living embodiment of what was started there. And therefore, are challenged and charged to continue to put this brilliance into the world, and to hold a mirror up in a lot of ways to society and to America in this pursuit of a more perfect union. America preaches its ideals but does not practice its ideals, and Black people have always been the litmus test for that, and also the mirror for that. And I really have come to enjoy learning about the Harlem Renaissance kind of through those concepts and lenses. Some of the figures that we've spoken about, but putting them all on one page and you seeing them together to put them in context, that they weren't doing this in a vacuum, and they were not doing this alone. They were doing this in concert with each other, and they knew that they were a part of something bigger than themselves. And that's important for us all to know, in this day and age where we are very self-involved, and it's about a lot of sharing about ourselves. It's important to counter that with the thought around community, and that none of this gets done individually. Fast forward to today, it's in the headlines, the conversation around a new Black Renaissance. And this has been going on before the events of last year. It's been going on for forever. As like I said, I mean, it's taken new shapes when you think about what came after the Harlem Renaissance, in terms of it didn't die. The Great Depression happened, and things changed, and civil rights happened, and so much. But when you think about Harlem as a place, both a physical location and a mind state, but right now a physical location, and you think about who lived and worked and loved in Harlem, right? From then on, I mean, you have James Baldwin, Nina Simone, Malcolm X, and so many that as a result of the Harlem Renaissance made Harlem home. And that to this day lives on. But in the headlines, there's talk of a new Black Renaissance, and last year in the movement for Black lives, and coupled with the captive nature of the pandemic, and that we were all forced to process our society and its ills in a different way, without the same distractions that we normally would have. It's definitely heightened things, I believe, and awareness, and we're better for that. It was out of tragedy and adversity, but we continue to move forward and push. But what is really incredible is that it tapped into the consciousness of a larger society, and particularly white society, which is important. But I say this is not a renaissance. I say this is a reawakening and a continuing. And in that regard, you now have so many storytellers that are doing so much with their talents, and these are just some examples of some of the high level people, but they are representative of you and me, of the artists and thinkers and people right here in the Pacific Northwest and in Tacoma, and all around the country and around the world. It's gone global as well, around Black brilliance, to where we are reaching heights that have never been seen before, and that's what's supposed to be. You're supposed to continue to rise and to improve. But some of these folks need no introduction. But it's important to note, down bottom left, you have Kendrick Lamar, an incredible poet, you know, but you know, by designation a rapper, winning a Pulitzer Prize, you know, things like that. You know, Jay-Z and Beyonce and what they do in the arts, and Ryan Coogler and what he's been, you know, so many, Ava DuVernay, all of these folks, you know who they are. But continuing on to activists and thinkers and designers and people that are using their platforms to share these stories and to challenge people and us, you know, as far as thought is really, you know, really important. But you can see the parallels. You can see how Ta-Nehisi Coates is standing on the back of on the shoulders of James Baldwin. You know, even in this picture, you can see how Virgil Abloh, who now is, you know, the head designer for Louis Vuitton, is on the shoulders of Dapper Dan, who's from Harlem, you know, and who has done incredible work in the fashion world, but through ingenuity and through kind of making something, you know, old things new, to where Gucci did not like what he was doing, and now he has an atelier that is is Gucci branded, and he is an official, you know, Gucci ambassador. Those types of things, you know, it's not with one. You cannot talk about one without the other. And I mean, I don't know if there's anything more representative of where we are and where we've come than, you know, Barack and Michelle Obama, of course, but this choice, right, of their portraits and who to paint them and how they were represented. I mean, I just see the Harlem Renaissance all through that. You know, and by extension, you know, Kehinde Wiley and Amy Sherrill represent, you know, Theaster Gates and you know, Kerry James Marshall and Kara Walker, and so, you know, I mean, there are countless incredibly brilliant visual artists today that are creating just the most beautiful works in so many different ways, and we have to, you know, just recognize them in this way, but also I think hold everyone accountable to that thought around community, you know, and that we are greater together and that we are here for a purpose to continue for what this will spawn and what this will evolve into. I think this may be the last slide. I was going to, oh, you know what? No, there's one more. And I just want to do this because again, speaking about my personal connection to community and collaboration and the spirit in which I've grown and that I continue to want, you know, to work in, kind of came full circle here in Tacoma. I mentioned, you know, that I worked in fashion for many years, and during that time, about 15 years ago or so, I met this young man on a street called Fairfax in Los Angeles, and of which I'm kind of one of the pioneers for that area as far as opening a store and what that street kind of developed into. My store was one of the first, and really one of the kind of pillars of the area. And now it's an incredibly like vibrant youth mecca for fashion and skateboarding and hip hop and all this convergence of inspirations and people. But this young man, Umi Wagner, was an intern, 17 years old, that I took an interest in. He was an intern for a friend of mine, a brand called The Hundreds. And I didn't know he was from Tacoma at the time, even though we always, you know, would touch base and I am his elder, but I always, you know, treated, you know, as he told me, treated him like a peer, which I never think about doing, but I guess I strive to do. But we had a great bond. Lost touch for many years. Did not know he's from Tacoma. When we started talking about bringing the collection here, I was talking to a good friend of mine in Seattle, and he was like, "I have to introduce you to my friend Umi." And at the time, of course, I was like, "Oh man, I know an Umi, but it can't be him." But sure enough, it was. And if you don't know who Umi Wagner is, he is the founder and proprietor of ETC Tacoma. It is a clothing brand and kind of cultural hub and hub for youth here in Tacoma, right down the street from TAM. And they've been around for about 7 years and have really been representing for Tacoma and particularly Black Tacoma. And we got in contact, and it was this full circle moment because I was able to bring a lot of my backgrounds to this collaboration, working through the lens of fashion and art, of course, and community and everything. But he and I were able to connect again, and we were able to do a collaborative merchandise capsule together that is on sale in a pop-up shop at Tacoma Art Museum in a three-way kind of collaboration. So it's TAM, it's the Kinsey collection, and it's ETC. But what's more is that it formed as a bridge between now ETC and TAM, and a relationship that will continue after the collection is gone. And I couldn't be more thrilled about that, because again, it's about extension, it's about building bridges, and it's just remarkable. But again, I can see how this came out of the Harlem Renaissance. I can see how this is a culmination of my life and experiences and all that. And it's something that I'm really excited to continue on. But with that, we're right at 3 o'clock. I've probably said enough. And I know I wanted to open it up to any type of questions or conversation that we may be able to have, via chat and the like. I was going to show one final thing is there's a young filmmaker, another kind of full circle moment for me, a young brother that I've known for many years, also through the lens of fashion. But he was probably around 17, 18 when I knew him when I first met him, took a great interest in him. But we lost touch, and he then blossomed into this brilliant filmmaker. His name's Rodney Passay, and he did a piece called Where Are the African Gods? And I was going to try to show it during this session, but sometimes it gets choppy and in terms of streaming as far as through this Zoom platform. So did not want to compromise that experience for you, because it is just that. It is something that I get the chills. I've seen it 100 times, but I get the chills every single time. It's called Where Are the African Gods? And it's being shown in the pop-up shop at TAM throughout the exhibition. And I think Amelia and I are talking about some ways in which we may be able to highlight it in even a greater sense. But if you come by TAM, take a moment and go by the pop-up shop. It'd be great if you bought something, but also if you just took a moment and sat. It's about 3 minutes, but it'll be a 3 minutes well spent, and one that you will want to relive. I guarantee it. But with that, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your time with us on a Sunday. And thank you, Amelia, for all that you do, because it's a lot. But also for your friendship, for your introduction. And I say that to all of the TAM staff. Just thank you. David Setford, who I saw is on the line, to all of my friends in the curatorial, to everyone. It's just been a beautiful, beautiful experience. One that I jump at the chance to get up here. So it's great to be over here. And with that, thank you so much, y'all. I hope this was time well spent.
We have a couple questions. And so if there's any more questions, now's the time to throw them in the Q&A or the chat. So we did have one question in the chat that was, is there a museum in Harlem or New York City dedicated to the celebration of Black culture and the Renaissance? Is there a museum that you know of?
And I'm sorry, I did something wrong. I think the share, I'll stop share.
There you go.
There we go. Do you see me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was the video.
Okay.
So there are, and perhaps not dedicated strictly or solely to the telling of the Harlem Renaissance, but there are cultural institutions there in Harlem. There's the Schomburg Center. There is the Studio Museum of Harlem, which has been and continues to be an incredible institution in the advancement of Black arts, and so many. They have an incredible artist in residency program that, if you were to review like the participants over the years, they would be, they are some of it's a who's who of Black art, and what they've risen to be. There's a great documentary that came out on HBO this year called Black Art in the Absence of Light. It really chronicles David Driscoll's contributions to the African American and art history, but also Thelma Golden, who is the director of the Studio Museum of Harlem, and their story. But yes, and then so much. But I always say Harlem itself is a museum. I mean, of course it's changing and in transition in many ways, but it's still so vibrant when it comes to Black culture, and just being out there, you feel it.
Thank you. David asked, I'm going to read his whole thing in the Q&A. So I'm speaking for David now. Hi, Khalil. It's my impression that we see few visual art objects from the African American community until around the turn of the 19th, 20th century. Though there is literature and other cultural artifacts from the 18th and 19th centuries. Is that just me imagining it, or do they exist but we aren't taught about them? If not, why would that be?
Well, I think, I always say that you cannot remove any part aspect of Black creativity or existence from historical context. It's just that more, it's just that more heightened as far as understanding the challenges of the time and why that may have precluded or not, allowed for certain existences. But throughout, there's always been, Black people and Black artists who have been creating and indulging their passions. In thinking about Civil War era and Reconstruction, even in the collection, there are pieces from, you would think that I know when I learned about these artists such as Robert Scott Duncanson and Henry Asawa Tanner and Grafton Tyler Brown and more, Edward Mitchell Bannister, May Howard Jackson, and Monia Lewis. I was blown away to understand that Black people were creating during a time that I only knew was that we were being killed and put in servitude and da da da, right? But the complexity of American history when it comes to free Blacks and opportunities and the North and the South and the West and all of these different things, really start coloring, painting a fuller picture. But yes, there were people, there were artists creating, during the time of slavery and during the time of Reconstruction and reaching great heights, leaving the United States and finding acclaim and being collected by aristocracy and royalty and all of those things. But it's left out of our artistic, history and our American history, starting to become, a little more, we're becoming more aware of it a little bit, but it just wasn't of Black people. It was, so what we always say, there's no such thing as Black art or white art or whatever, right? It's heart and soul and mind, and you know what I mean? It's human. And so you can look at a lot of it, but back then it was the mediums of the day, the approach of the day, which was still lifes and landscapes.
Mhm.
And portraiture.
Yeah, and I think we also just because we were born into this Western artistic canon, we forget that Africa has a rich artistic history, and we ignore that a lot of the time. So that came with people here and continued in many ways. We just don't call it art with a capital A always, and that's part of the problem. Um, there, there are some great questions happening, so I just want to be able to get to some more of them. One of them was, this one just is relevant to that. What artist who is not yet a part of the collection would you want to include? And I'm sure there's many, but.
Wow, yeah, there are many. That's a difficult one to pinpoint, but there are so many, I don't always like the term or, emerging artists and da da da, just, as far as just from a commercial aspect, but there are so many incredible young artists that I would love to support. Many who I've come to know and become friends with, and we're looking, to support. And then there's also, a lot of people. I mean, there are artists that I'm still continuing to learn about, such as Bob Thompson, who is as an artist that we've just were able to acquire a work of his in 1964 piece. But I didn't know anything about him. And we learned about him and his contribution, but it really mirrors like that of Basquiat's, where he was a young phenom that was a darling of the art world and considered to have, talents beyond his training and his years, but died very young, and had limited output, and, that type of thing. So being able to fill in the blanks and tell his story, right, and represent that, and like all of that are very important. But there are so many living artists to support, and it's hard to pinpoint just one. But I just I learn about new artists every day. I'll tell you what though, just yesterday, we shot out of here to Seattle to the Seattle Art Museum to see the Barbara Earl Thomas exhibition. And we had the pleasure of meeting Miss Thomas at TAM a few months ago before the opening. And she had in her bag or whatever it was, a folder, this incredible panel that's like it's paper that she actually cuts out to for light to shine through, but it's these images and all of this stuff. And that's what's on display in the exhibition at SAM. So it was incredible. It was moving. It's a spiritual experience, and I'm not overstating that. But to get up close to her work, but also to know that she was, a studio manager for Jacob Lawrence. You know what I mean? And all of and all of that. And she just has another exhibition that just opened in Seattle, but at University of Washington, I believe, at the Henry.
Yeah.
Her and Derek Adams, which is an artist that I'd love to have in the collection, of course. But they have a collaborative exhibition that just opened yesterday, so I look forward to getting to that next time I'm up here. But I had not heard of Miss Thomas, and now I'm in love with Mrs. Thomas's work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's ongoing, but it's hard to choose.
Yeah, there was no right answer to that, or even an answer to that, because I'm sure you're going to find artists throughout history that then you want to put into the canon by bringing them into the Kinsey collection. Yeah. How many pieces of the collection are at TAM, and what was your curatorial vision for this particular exhibition, or is it your usual quote unquote traveling exhibit?
Oh, for sure. Well, thank you. The number of pieces, and I should do a final count. I should know the exact piece, but I believe I did, and I believe it's right around 176 or something. For some reason that stands in my head. It's one of our larger exhibitions. It's allowed for to show a larger breadth of the exhibition, as well as new pieces and never shown pieces. No exhibition is the same. We definitely customize the experience, but this has been collaborative in every way. So working with TAM curatorial staff, in conceptualizing this exhibition, along with my colleague and friend Larry Earl on the Kinsey side, and Taylor Jackson, who's our everything. We came up with what I believe is one of our best shows, and one that I'm one of the just extremely proud of because of its flow and the experience it provides, the depth it goes, but also this flourish again of like this Black creativity, right? How this kind of ascension from one gallery to the next mirrors kind of the ascension of Black life, and this elevation and flourish. It's something I really love. I love that experience. Just even myself, even knowing the exhibition, like I feel it kind of a new experience when I go in it. And yeah, like we are always keen to pull out pieces or identify pieces in the collection that have direct correspondence to the area, the region that we're showing, And so in this case, we were able to do that in several different pieces. One being just uncanny, Grafton Tyler Brown's Mount Tacoma from Lake Washington, 1880. You know what I mean? That is it's the most insane thing to look out the window of the hotel over at Tacoma Art Museum, see Mount Rainier in the background, right? And then to go in and see that it hasn't changed a bit, right? In this painting, and how this gentleman saw it and painted it in 1880 and now, right? I mean, it's lost a little snow, unfortunately, but it's just amazing. So to be able to show that, we've had that in the collection forever, you know what I mean? To be able to show that, is incredible here. Jacob Lawrence, his direct, his influence and time here. But what's even crazier is that there's a letter from my great uncle James Webster not from Jacob Lawrence to my great uncle James Webster when he lived in Seattle with his Seattle address, and all of that. We've never shown that before. That was left to my mom, So to be able to touch on that, I learned about Seattle connection like a week before we opened, where we had to update one of the labels that was about Hiram Rhodes Revels, the first Black senator in the United States, senator from Mississippi in the 41st and 42nd Congress. He had plans to move to Seattle around the turn of the century. He passed away, but his daughter comes to Seattle as a result of one of his students, the Hiram Rhodes Rebel students, he was president of Alcorn State University in Mississippi. One of his students moves to Seattle, starts a newspaper. Then starts a relationship, kind of a pen pal relationship with Hiram Rhodes Rebel's daughter. They form a relationship. She moves to Seattle. They get married. She becomes his assistant editor. She becomes the first female editor in the Pacific Northwest. Again, not the first Black female editor, the first female editor in the Pacific Northwest. They were considered to be one of the most prominent Black families in Washington. And they had a home that is now being designated as a historical site in what is now Capitol Hill, right? So again, this shows that history continues to unfold, and there's so much to explore and know. But to that question, we were able to tell the story, of the Hiram Rhodes Rebels, his daughter, right? But how that connects to us here in Tacoma and in the greater Northwest, so it's really, really cool.
That's awesome. I didn't know that story yet. We have a couple more questions. What are the plans for you and your parents for the future / permanent home for your collection?
Yeah, we're still developing it, in a lot of ways. This, I always share that we're catching up to this, and still it feels like some time, because it definitely took a life of its own, one that we could have never predicted or even, done on our own. It's something that people have done, in terms of connecting to it, and it kind of snowballing as far as the awareness around not us, but the actual contents and the information, and so as a result, I always tell people, this was in my parents' home, and this was something that they were passionate about personally, and for themselves and for me, and for their community. But they didn't know that, they didn't even know that was a possibility, you know what I mean, to have it to be a public traveling exhibition. And even how it got its start, it was only supposed to be one exhibition, and and that was it. It was supposed to be done in 2006 and be back home and all of that, and here we are 15 years later, 34 exhibitions later, and so I think some of that is for me to develop, as being the next generation. I know that being that the delicate nature of so much of this, of course the history and the ephemeral objects and all that, will necessitate us figuring out some sort of permanent location at some point, and in my wildest dreams we do have a museum, and everything, but right now we are beyond thrilled to travel it, to meet people where they are, and to be nimble, and and all of that. We always say, there's a need for a large scale institutions such as the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, but there's also a need for an exhibition such as ours, because everybody's not going to go to DC or can't go to DC, and but how do they get this information? And so that's where how we kind of see ourselves. So we're going to keep traveling, for the foreseeable future. We have exhibitions, some exhibitions scheduled upcoming. Of course, COVID did some things to slow some of those conversations down, but we're resuming a lot of them, and more opportunities have arisen as well. TAM was one that was pre-COVID, and one that we were already really excited for, and so happy that we were still able to do this. And our next exhibition is going to be a smaller show, but in Los Angeles, and at Pepperdine University, their Robert Weissman Museum on campus there, and which is really great because my parents are alumni of Pepperdine University, their master's program, and also were given the Distinguished Alumni Award, both of them, a few years back, and so that's a great full circle moment to be able to bring the exhibition there, but it will be a lot smaller and everything. But yeah, we're gonna continue moving for a little while.
I think we're all excited to visit the Kinsey Museum of African American Art and Culture eventually. We have a couple questions. We have a couple people who raised their hands, and I just want to let them have an opportunity to speak in case they can't type their questions into the chat. So Dorothy, you had your hand up for a while. I'm going to allow you to talk, and if you don't have anything to say at this point, that's okay. Just let us know. And you
Hi, Dorothy.
are muted, so if you're trying to talk right now, we can't hear you. Sometimes this happens. She
Dorothy,
might have
you're on
clicked a
mute.
button too. All right, Dorothy, I'm gonna assume this was a mistake and that's a-okay. You can always try again later. But Dale, you have your hand up, so I'm gonna allow you to talk. And make sure you're unmuted. Do you have a question, Dale? Again,
Yeah, you're on mute.
maybe just a mistaken hand raise.
It's the best.
While we're doing that, is there a website where we can track ongoing exhibitions? How can people follow the Kinseys and all their great work?
I'm glad you asked. Yes, there is a website, thekinseycollection.com, where we keep calendar updated, as well as our social media outlets, primarily Instagram, but also Facebook as well, and Twitter sometimes. But yeah, we stay pretty active on socials and sharing events and upcoming exhibitions and all kinds of different things. So, and that is simply the Kinsey Collection as well.
Yeah, and I will say the Kinseys are wonderful at sending email updates about stuff and
Yes.
knowing what's going on.
Yes.
So join their mailing list.
Absolutely. You can do that on our website, thekinseycollection.com. Thanks for that, Amelia. That's right.
Yeah.
You can join our we don't bombard you with emails. We just give you the,
but they're useful, and then you can go join a Zoom like today, maybe, if you didn't know about it was happening already. Beverly asked if there's a way to continue the conversation after this event, and I think you can just stick around once we're done, Beverly, and maybe we can unmute you for a little chat with Khalil. But the question that seems really relevant for everyone is, how can we read articles and pieces from the magazines that you mentioned? Is there, if you could send those to me, I could maybe send them out to everyone, or if there's a Google search that works well for you.
In terms of the magazines that I mentioned, such as Fire, or in terms of?
I'm not sure. I think possibly about the new Black Renaissance that's happening and some of that stuff.
Well, I Google is always, the best way, just to, type in those keywords. That's how I kind of discovered a lot of them. But yeah, there's a lot there. Time magazine did an incredible issue called that has Amanda Gorman on the cover. And they have an incredible built out website for it. But it's the new Black Renaissance, or the Renaissance issue, I believe it's called, and that was this year. So that's really cool. I remember New York Times Magazine did one on Black writers, as far as, again, kind of being of that extension, of the Harlem Renaissance. There are a lot of incredible, really great like think pieces on it and everything, which has been really cool for me, because I felt, at the kind of like years ago, felt like I was like the only one like coming like, do you guys understand what we did? You know what I mean? But then to see that the conversation is, not that I've led it in any way, but that it's, happening is really, for me, it's really, really reinforcing. But and in particular, if the question is about Fire magazine, while that was printed in 1926, there is a gentleman who I think was the partner of Richard Bruce Nugent. He's a professor at I think Occidental or something like that. But he was left the whatever the term is for like the print of it, and he actually makes reprints of Fire magazine. And you can go, you can find it if you just type in Fire magazine, I believe, and he'll send you this reprinted issue of Fire magazine. But you can also read it digitally on issue.com, and find it there.
Someone's asking if the Negro in art is available digitally, and I'm not finding an easy Googleable answer to that just right now.
I've never looked for it digitally, but I believe you can get a physical copy of it.
Yeah, and one thing that I did find while I was doing other research for this is you can find like the first 30 years of the crisis online, and you can read those, and they're fascinating.
That's cool.
So I encourage everyone to do that.
I'm scared to look at I'm scared to open ours, so
This way you can look at someone who's already scanned one of
Right,
you.
right. Thank you for that. I'll definitely do that. There was one other one too. Oh, and then James Porter, who I mentioned. What I didn't mention is that he wrote one of what is considered to be, one of the foremost writings on Black art during the time. Is 1943 Modern Negro Art, and that is a great book.
Cool. And I just saw at the local bookstore, there's a new Life and Times of Alan Locke book that looks fascinating. So I'm excited to dip into that. We seem to be out of questions. So if anyone has any last questions that they want to throw in the chat or the Q&A, we hit our timing perfectly. This is awesome.
Yeah.
But I do want to thank everyone for joining us. And hopefully you all can go see the exhibit again for the first time. Bring your friends, bring your family. And I want to thank you, Khalil, for just sharing your excitement and your energy and your knowledge around this. It's been great to learn more from you.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine.